And the question is, will talks help end the wars? Just a few hours ago, in fact, Russian and American officials held talks on Ukraine in the capital city of Saudi Arabia. This was the first discussion on the issue since the war started 3 years ago in February 2022. Russia's chief foreign policy advisor, Yuri Ushakov, has said it, quote-unquote, went well, and that they had a serious conversation on all issues. Ushakov said that separate teams of Russian and US negotiators will begin communicating on Ukraine in due course. They also briefly discussed the conditions needed for a Putin-Trump summit. But here's the thing, the meeting took place without Ukraine or Europeans. Earlier, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky rejected any outcome from the talks that do not include Kyiv. And so all of this triggers several crucial questions. What do the US and Russia hope to gain from the Riyadh talks? Why have Europe and Ukraine been sidelined from the talks? What security guarantees, if any, can Ukraine actually expect from the discussions? And what role will Saudi Arabia play in the Ukraine solution? Let's first just take a look at who all attended the meeting in Riyadh. On the table were U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and the U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. The Russian side, meanwhile, was represented by the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Russia's Chief Foreign Policy Advisor Yuri Ushakov, and the hosts were Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud and the Saudi National Security Advisor Mossad bin Mohammed Al Eben. According to Reuters, the discussion started with Russia stating that NATO membership for Ukraine is simply unacceptable. Russia's foreign ministry also said NATO must disavow a promise made at NATO summit in 2008 that Ukraine would eventually become a member of the organization. Just for context here, at a summit in Romania's capital, in April 2008, NATO had declared that both Ukraine and Georgia would join the US-led defense alliance, but gave them no plan for actually how to get there. But you see, this demand should not be a problem as far as Washington is concerned, because earlier the Trump administration changed its position on Ukraine's NATO membership. Trump's team has stated that this is no longer on the table. Now remember, Ukraine's bid for NATO membership was a major factor that contributed to the war. According to the U.S. State Department spokesperson, Tammy Bruce, U.S. and Russian delegations have agreed to address irritants in their bilateral relationship. The two sides also agreed to appoint high-level teams for Ukraine talks and work towards ending the war as soon as possible. The statement further claimed that President Trump wants to stop the killing. The U.S. wants peace and is using its strength in the world to bring countries together. The statement said, and I'm quoting, President Trump is the only leader in the world who can get Ukraine and Russia to agree to that. Now, 3 years after intense fighting has resulted in thousands of deaths on both sides, the message coming in from Washington surely undermines Ukraine's hopes and in a way raises doubts about its goal to reclaim all of its lost territory. We're not just talking about Crimea, which was annexed by Russia in 2014, but also the 4 regions of Luhansk, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, which were, remember, annexed by Russia in 2022. Earlier, critics have argued that the Trump administration is making major concessions for Russia, while U.S. officials maintain that they are simply recognizing the realities of the situation. Now, this is where these talks become absolutely crucial. Not only because Ukraine is part of the discussions, but also because other important issues are at stake. Both Putin and Trump have earlier expressed a desire to discuss topics beyond the war, including nuclear arms control, strategies to reduce global energy prices. Under the Biden administration, the United States provided Ukraine with tens of billions of dollars worth of weapons and aid. America also led Western governments in imposing a series of sanctions on Russia. However, Russia has managed to endure the sanctions. Now, with the way the talks have gone in Riyadh, we cannot help but wonder how Ukrainian and European officials are actually feeling. Both Ukraine and European leaders are concerned that Trump could hastily negotiate a deal with Russia, perhaps, that overlooks their security interests. rewards Russia, and in a way allows Putin to continue threatening Ukraine and possibly other countries in the future if he wants. However, like we told you last night, the sidelining of Europe in these discussions by Washington could show just how little influence they realistically have in matters concerning Ukraine, with dwindling armed forces and a dependency on American leadership and security support. They seem to have come to accept that they cannot help Ukraine without US backing. And so at this point, the question is, does their criticism truly matter? And Europe is more worried about Donald Trump than Vladimir Putin as American and Russian diplomats met in Riyadh. The coming together has caused a lot of unease in Europe, which in a way feels it's been sidelined, and Washington's moves are further emboldening Moscow. Our next report brings the anxiety that has gripped European capitals.
The war in Ukraine is raging. Europe stands at a crossroads. NATO faces its biggest test yet. Will the US abandon the security pact? There's a growing concern that US President Donald Trump may scale back or entirely withdraw American troops from Europe, particularly the Baltics, where it has more than 5,000 soldiers. Trump's willingness to consider withdrawing troops from Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania has sent shockwaves across the continent. European officials see this as a major security risk. In total, there are about 100,000 American troops in Europe. The US also has an estimated 100 B-61 nuclear gravity bombs that are forward deployed at 6 NATO bases in 5 European countries. The implications are stark: a potentially weaker NATO, an emboldened Russia, and deepening rifts within the European Union over how to respond. Moscow, which has the upper hand on the battlefield, is now demanding that Ukraine should be a demilitarized neutral state outside any alliances.
The future of Ukraine needs to be a demilitarized neutral state, not a part of any blocs or alliances, for as has already been acknowledged by a US colleague, now specifically President Trump. It is indeed the prospect of the entry of Ukraine into NATO which triggered the crisis. And I think that this is now clear to all.
Kyiv is rejecting these conditions, warning that without security guarantees, Russia could launch another invasion, a sentiment echoed by European leaders.
And I'm prepared to consider committing British forces on the ground, alongside others, if there is a lasting peace agreement. But there must be a US backstop, because a US security guarantee is the only way to effectively deter Russia from attacking Ukraine again.
The most important thing about this meeting tonight is the need for all of us to step up when it comes to our spendings on defense. Russia is not only a threat to Ukraine, but all of us. So we need to scale up and we need to speed up.
An emergency meeting in Paris saw European leaders scramble for a united response, but Germany rejected calls by France and Britain to send troops to Ukraine. As European leaders grapple with their response, options range from dramatically increased defense spending to reduce US dependency to providing direct security guarantees to Ukraine. Yet each proposal faces resistance, highlighting the challenge of forging consensus in a fragmented Europe. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
China is facing a serious issue. It's a problem within. The decline in marriage registrations, which has triggered serious birth rate concerns. Just how bad are things looking really? We'll get to that in just a bit. First, what is being done about it? One of the ways is offering cash to newlywed couples. It's hoped that the marriage rates will see a boost through this incentive measure. In fact, the city of Luliang in northern Shanxi province is one of the many places in China where local authorities are offering incentives to lure couples into tying the knot. The 1,500 yuan reward, which is about $205, is part of official efforts to boost the country's population. And the sum, by the way, is half a month's average wage for Luliang's urban population and more than the monthly average wage for its rural citizens, according to official data. In fact, when Luliang's cash incentive for marriage was announced online, many commented that the amount would not be enough to justify the commitment. Just to break this down for you further, the reward is just the flashiest part of the package in a way. The city is also offering subsidies, medical insurance contributions for registering newborns. You heard that right. Married couples in Luliang are given 2,000 yuan for their first registered child, 5,000 for their second, 8,000 for their third. But just how bad are things in China really, and why are these measures being adopted in the first place? Well, the marriage rate in China fell by a record 20% in 2024. In fact, the country's population fell for the third straight year in 2024. A record 20% plunge in marriages last year was the steepest decline ever recorded. You get the picture. So clearly China is worried, and the country really wants people to get married and have children so that the birth rates improve. The decline in marriage rate raises further concerns about the country's shrinking population, and there have been government initiatives to encourage young couples to marry and have children in order to boost the country's declining population. But why does China find itself in this situation? Well, just to put it simply, declining interest in getting married and starting a family has long been blamed on the high cost of childcare and education in China. On top of that, sputtering economic growth over the past few years has made it rather difficult for university graduates to find work, and those that do have jobs feel insecure in a way about their long-term prospects, reportedly. But can such incentives fix China's population woes, is the question. In a way, the Chinese government's political and economic ambitions are directly linked to that answer. And China's top counter-spy agency has arrested an ex-soldier for allegedly sending military secrets to a foreign espionage agency. You heard that right. China's Ministry of State Security in a post on Tuesday stated that the ex-soldier passed photos and videos about troop deployment locations, weapon configurations and details about military barracks near border areas to a foreign espionage agency via social media. And upon investigating, the ministry found that the account was registered to an 80-year-old man who had served 2 years in China's military. The ex-soldier had allegedly been dismissed from service owing to disciplinary issues. According to the ministry, the ex-soldier was skilled at counter-surveillance and being secretive, which made his capture extremely difficult. In fact, it was only when Chinese national security officers intercepted an order from a foreign espionage agency instructing the ex-soldier to steal secrets from a particular military base that they managed to pick up a trail on him. The ministry did not disclose further details about the ex-soldier, while information about his arrest remains vague. It allegedly arrested the ex-soldier in a remote part of China, where the terrain is considered to be treacherous and impassable, primarily due to heavy snowstorms during the winter. And according to reports, the Chinese national security officer set up a trap and nabbed the suspect. In a post on social media, the Chinese intelligence agency said that military-related information is highly sensitive and is a primary target for foreign espionage agencies, further urging the public to report filming of any kind of military sites. While China has publicized a large number of cases of alleged espionage by foreign countries, the arrest of Chinese nationals on charges of spying domestically is rare. On to Canada now, where a Delta Airlines jet flipped on its roof while landing at Toronto's Pearson Airport, and the visuals will tell you it was a pretty deadly flip. Luckily, all 80 people on board survived, while almost 18 people suffered minor injuries. The crash marks the fourth major aviation accident in North America in the past 3 weeks. What explains this? Our next report, getting you the complete story.
It was no less than a drastic fall, as within seconds the plane topples and goes sideways, leaving passengers trapped inside the flight, upside down, horrified. The flight, Mitsubishi CRJ 900LR from Minneapolis, carrying 76 passengers and 4 crew members, attempted to land at Toronto around 2:15 p.m. EST on the 17th of February, amidst snowy conditions.
1 minute you're landing, kind of waiting to see your friends and your people, and the next minute you're physically upside down and just really turned around. But it sounded, I mean, it was just cement and metal, you know.
What's surprising is the fact that there was no indication of the incident even as the plane touched down, as communications between the tower and pilot were confirmed to be clear. The plane topples and goes sideways, while firefighters doused the leftover flames. This could have been far more devastating than it looks, and could also have led to loss of lives, thus reviving memories of what happened in the January 29 crash in Washington, D.C., where 67 people died in a collision between a commercial jetliner and an army helicopter. This serves as a grim reminder of the spate of aviation accidents. On January 31st, a medical transportation plane crashed in Philadelphia, leaving all 6 people on board and another person on the ground dead. And on February 6th, 10 people died in a plane crash in Alaska. Even as the cause for the Delta plane crash remains unknown, active investigation is underway.
Good evening. I'm Todd Aiken, Toronto Pearson Fire Chief. The cause of the crash is still under investigation and being led by the Transportation Safety Board. It's not appropriate for us to comment at this time. However, I can speak to you about our Aircraft Rescue and Firefighting Services response.
While air travel remains one of the safest modes of travel compared to rail or road, the spate of accidents in recent months begs an important question. Is it time to take a closer look at global aviation safety procedures? Bureau Report, WION World is One.